On this June 17th at 5:33 p.m. And we'd like to welcome anyone who's visiting this meeting tonight. Welcome here. Looking at our agenda, our first item of business is to approve the minutes from the prior meeting, which were included in the package. We don't do that anymore. We don't do it, and we used to, but we found we didn't have to. Okay. But we can.
No, I was just wondering.
Okay. So if, without objection, we will adopt the minutes from the prior meeting. Is there any objection? Then the meetings have been.
If there's no further questions, I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from the May 20th, 2025 Planning Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The meeting minutes from the prior meeting have been accepted. And we now move to our first item of business, which is a Mountain West Pipeline application for a conditional use. Do we have a staff report for that?
Yes, Xiao
thank
Dong of
you.
our staff will present that.
Okay. So good evening, everyone. So we've got conditional use permit application submitted by Mountain West Pipeline LLC. The applicant is requesting approval to construct a 180-foot telecommunication tower, which is antenna tower, on 320-acre parcel. So that is a location. So the location is near North Lake Mountain Communications Road in the Lake Mountain area of unincorporated Utah County. So the proposed tower is intended to support internal communications within the Mountain West pipeline system by transmitting signals between remote towers. The subject property is zoned mining and grazing one zone and currently contains multiple communication facilities. The surrounding area is largely undeveloped, and the nearest residential subdivision is approximately 2 miles away. Yeah, you can see the location. And so telecommunication towers are permitted use in the MG1 zone per section 12.28B27 of the Utah County Land Use Ordinance. However, the section 12.28G1 limits the height of such structures to 100 feet unless a conditional use is granted by the Planning Commission for a greater height. So in this case, the applicant is proposing a tower with a height of 180 feet. So due to the remote location and operational needs of the transmission system, so staff found that the increased height is justifiable and unlikely to negatively impact public health, safety, or welfare. And staff recommend approval of the conditional use permit. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions and our applicant are here and happy to answer any question you may have as well. Thank you.
Any questions for staff?
I don't have any.
Is the applicant here?
Yeah, applicant are here, yeah.
Thank you.
My name is Cindy Sheehan. I am the
Cindy
land rep for Mountain West Pipeline. We are the old Questar pipeline, so we have kind of a history in this area. South of that, we have a facility, and so that facility will send a signal up to this tower. And the reason it's so tall is because our network between Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah, we try to hit the highest mountains instead of putting a bunch of towers along the way, so that's why it is necessary to be so tall.
Okay, any questions for the applicant?
So you're talking about achieving line of sight between your towers, or is there some other
Right, yeah,
consideration?
so we can send a signal throughout our whole network around the 3 states.
Okay.
Yeah, so because it's on the top of the mountain, it has to be tall enough to get signals from the low part without having an intermediate tower in between. If that makes sense, I hope.
So is it a tower and will it have like dishes on the tower?
It's only for our internal communication, so it'll have some sort of microwave on the top, but it won't be like, we don't rent space to Verizon or anything like that. This is just for our internal communications.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then do we have, we have one additional person that would like to speak on this topic, is that right? Is it Maria?
Maria's my coworker.
Your coworker, you're good though, okay. Okay. Any discussion from the commission?
If there's no discussion, I'll make a motion. I move that the Utah County Planning Commission approve the conditional use permit CU 2025-04, a request for the height of a proposed telecommunication tower to exceed 100 feet, subject to staff findings, including the staff report and the following conditions as noted.
Okay, there's a motion.
Second?
Second? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that motion has passed.
Whatever.
Okay. We'll move to the next item on our agenda, which is a land use ordinance amendment. And we will need a public hearing after we hear the
Correct.
report. Okay.
Yep, yep. Ms. Dong has this one also.
Oh, yeah. So this text amendment is initiated by the Utah County Community Development Department, and it is proposing to reduce the required side and rear setback for residential accessory structures, including detached ADU units of 1,500 square feet or less in the R5 and TR5 zones, which are our residential zones. So the proposed reduction would change the setback requirement from the current 15 feet to 10 feet. So the purpose of this amendment is to provide greater flexibility for the property owners, promote more efficient site design, and support the development of moderate income housing in alignment with Utah County's adopted moderate income housing plan and Utah State Code 7-27A-403. And this proposed amendment is consistent with the intent and purpose of the land use ordinance and appears to meet the requirement under the section 60.92 and 6.100. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the County Commission for this proposed text amendment as detailed in the staff report. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any question you may have regarding this text amendment.
Was there any concern from fire or others on the proximity, or is it looking pretty good?
So the fire marshal expressed the concern, noting that reduced setback can increase fire risk only in the wildland-urban interface area in this area. And despite that concern, so staff believe the proposed reduction balances flexibility for landowners with safety and land use efficiency, I think. And yeah.
Just to add to that, there was a similar text amendment last year in our CE2 zone. That's more our mountain areas, and the fire code and the building code have a more allowable setback, and so this is still a little more restrictive than what fire code has its basis. They still have to meet, fire separation between structures. Even with the 10-foot setback, that's still going to meet that requirement. The other thing to consider is these zones, and one of the reasons this is proposed by staff are these zones generally allow for smaller potential lot sizes. But to get to that lot size, you have to have a central water system, which would include hydrants. And so these areas would be areas that are generally serviced by a central water system with hydrants to help mitigate some of those concerns.
Could you remind me what lot sizes would be allowed in these zones?
So in the TR5 and the RR5 zone, the base density is similar to our residential agricultural zone of 1 house per 5 acres. The difference in these two zones is the provision for a planned subdivision to have lot sizes as small as 20,000 square feet, almost a half an acre, subject to the provision of a central water system.
And then the sizing of the ADU, is that in there just for the ADU size? Can you have an ADU larger than that, or is that tied to that ADU or to the residential structure?
Yeah, that's tied. You cannot have an ADU larger than that size.
1,500 square feet.
It's a detached ADU. It's generally, I think, is it 1,000 feet?
Yeah, 1,500 square feet, yeah.
Well, I think the default's 1,000, and then you can have if you sign a waiver or a restrictive covenant, I think is the term.
Yeah, correct. The ADU, a detached ADU, is allowed to be 1,000 square feet without any restrictions. But if they wanted to go up to 1,500, there is a restrictive covenant that is
Need to be recorded.
that needs to be recorded that requires them to, if they do rent it out, that it is rented at moderate income housing levels. So that's why the 1,500 is there specifically.
Oh, yeah.
I see the histories that over the years, seems like it's grown to 15 feet. It was 10 at one point, right? What was the reason it grew to 15, and what was the reasons for that?
So it actually, I believe, went to 25 feet at some point, and then just practice. I think, that's the nature of sometimes ordinances. Is you kind of, well, in this case they didn't. They started less, and then they got a little more conservative to have. Our RA5 zone had a 25-foot setback for a long time, and those areas generally do not have central water systems. And so I think to kind of be consistent, the Planning Commission, County Commission at the time, had those uniform. And then just over time, staff found that just the concerns weren't warranted. There was a concern, especially in the RA5 zone, of wasted space for agricultural use, to have those type of setbacks off the side and rear. A lot of people wanted to tuck their accessory structures more towards the back or in the corner to allow more flexibility in use of their agricultural property. And so we've a number of years ago, we just felt that it was best to kind of make this consistent, and felt that that's been supported by adopted fire codes and to give more flexibility to the property owner.
Is there any reason not to go less than 10 feet?
I mean, we get some pretty small lots in our CE2 zone, or our TR5 zone, or RR5 zone. I'm kind of lumping the CE2 zone because that was kind of our test case. And so we've always found that when you make that step, you kind of do it incrementally. It's harder to go back than it is to go down. And so you have some pretty small lots that are grandfathered in some of these zones. That could mean you could have two, if the adjoining property owner had a similar setback, you're getting pretty close together in small proximity. Generally, that's consistent with how cities are, but we have little different fire response areas in the county. So
Also, along with that, so as Bryce was saying, some of the lots are smaller, but there are some that are still quite large. And on those large lots, there are buildings that do get quite big, arenas and stuff like that, indoor arenas that can be quite big, and putting them closer than 10 feet sometimes is difficult because of the height and dimensions of those buildings. It's difficult for some adjacent property owners to kind of enjoy their property as well.
So with this change, you'd be able to build, say, a large barn and put it 10 feet away from the
This
side
still
setback.
this still limits the size of those. So they can go. They would still be able to put a large barn on their property. However, they would still be required, if it was a residential accessory structure, they would still be required to put it 15 feet away if it's more than 1,500 square feet.
But if it's under 1,500,
They could put it closer. Yeah.
what's the height limit?
We don't have a height restriction adjacent to property lines like most cities do. We just haven't seen a need for that. Generally, that hasn't been an issue for us in the county. So generally, we based on the kind of the uses that we've seen, we haven't seen a need to really restrict that at this point. So the height restriction would be for any other structure would be 40 feet, but we generally don't see something going that tall.
So to back that up, we do have a height restriction of 40 feet. Which if it's an unoccupied structure, they can ask for a conditional use to exceed that, but generally those type of uses are not considered unoccupied, so.
There's references to the low-income housing and initiatives. Did that drive some of this?
Yes, it did. One of the county's adopted objectives that the county adopted from the state's approved list included accessory dwelling units and creating regulations that eliminate barriers to the provision of more accessory dwelling units. And we felt that this was a good way to eliminate a potential barrier of greater setbacks, especially on smaller lots.
Any further questions for staff on this? Just these two zones though, right? Is it just two zones we're talking about?
Yes.
What's the height of a single-story home typically?
We have very few that ever exceed 40 feet. Generally, I think we looked at it, it was more like 25. Now, the building code has our ordinance refers to the height as measured by the building code. And on pitched roofs, they kind of get into average heights, kind of halfway between even the pitch or the roof line. So but even with that, I can't think of very many, if at all, we've had that have exceeded 40. I think there's been a couple that have, they can't because they're occupied structures.
Right.
But we've had some of their purposes, like a chimney or something that's come before that kind of request. But I would say a two-story house or a story with a home with a second story, it's been around 25 to 30 feet.
Right. So a single story would be what, like 12, 15?
Well, you get the roof in there, you're probably closer to 20. So
20?
yeah, they have kind of some shared space once that second floor. So.
How likely is it that an accessory dwelling unit would be more than a single-story smaller structure?
Pretty unlikely. We have I think it's still on the books, we have a provision that says it's got to be subordinate to the main dwelling. In design, is it in design? And sorry, I live in pull up the ordinance. We got to look at my staff who looks at this more regularly.
Right. It has to be subordinate in location, design, and no, I can't remember it. But basically, that would generally is interpreted that means that generally it shouldn't be higher or in a more prominent location than the main dwelling.
And with the size limitation, it'd be surprising to see a really tall accessory dwelling unit to hit that max of 1,500 square feet. I'd be surprised to see someone build it that tall. So,
Well, within our cities, at least, not so much in the county, there's a lot of pressure to approve smaller lot sizes and smaller, more condensed homes that are taller instead of wider, raising the height of the structure without increasing the square footage of the structure. So if we're going to go closer to a property line, would it be prohibitive if we said, if you're going to be this close to the property line, you need to reduce the height so that if there's another structure behind you, you're not encroaching too much visually on the adjoining structures?
Yeah, so you see that a lot in municipalities, like you were saying. In the county, we haven't seen that become an issue with most of the lots that we're dealing with. That could definitely be something that we could look at. Currently we haven't really seen people that have requested an ADU that have designed it in a way that would be any different than any kind of accessory structure or shed or something, like not shed necessarily, but other types of accessory structures that would exceed 2 stories, that would inhibit their ability to enjoy their property, based on our experience at the county, at least the permits that we have seen. So, but you're correct. There's a lot of jurisdictions that do have a height restriction based on how close they are to the property line, and do limit that height as they get closer to the property line. And I have seen that in many jurisdictions. We just, at this point, we haven't seen it become an issue for us. We haven't really seen a lot of requests that have asked for anything taller than what you'd normally see for other types of residential accessory structures. So, but we can definitely look into that if that's something you feel like would be important to review.
Are any of the areas that we're looking at putting this close enough to where they could be become part of a municipality, or grow to where they incorporate and become their own city?
Yeah, so generally, and Bryce could probably speak to this more clearly, but the TR and RR5 zones were designated for areas that were to be kind of located near municipalities to be in their annexation policy plan so that they could at some point be annexed into jurisdictions. We try to review our ordinances to make sure that we're not allowing things that might conflict with those jurisdictions, based on kind of our experience with residential accessory structures and other residential in other ADUs. We just, like I said, we just haven't seen a need for that yet. But yes, those zones are located next to municipalities generally.
Okay. So I guess my concern would be that if we approve something that is not conducive to being next to another developed area, and people who come in second say, hey, why is this thing so tall right next to me?
Agreed. Yeah. And that's definitely a concern that we try to take into consideration when we're reviewing these. Again, based on our experience, and this is only based on our experience, we just haven't seen any requests for heights that exceed just a typical residential accessory structure you'd see in any municipality that would cause concern for us to not conform with other jurisdictions.
Okay.
Generally.
So just to point out, the default setback is 15 feet. So it's, within 5 feet, you can have up to a 40-foot tall house. And so we're kind of looking at that second 5 feet, and if that would warrant maybe a further restriction on height. So if the planning commission feels it's warranted, like Greg said, we can take a look at that to put in some language, but haven't seen the concern yet. The other approach is to, see if it becomes a problem, then kind of be more reactive. Then you're stuck with one at least. But it's good point.
Any further questions for staff?
Nope.
You're carrying the ball. Okay. Well, I think we need to open the public hearing.
It's going to be long. Buckle down.
I'll entertain a motion. Open
So
the-
moved.
And do we have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of opening the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're now in a public hearing. There's, appears to be no one wanting to address the public hearing.
Saying that, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The public hearing is now closed. Is there a motion to consider?
I'll move to adopt the resolution as, for the, let's see, what's the right language here?
Are we the final or the recommending
This
on
would be
this
a
one?
recommendation to the county
Okay.
commission.
Okay, I move that we recommend approval to the Utah County Commission of the proposed amendments to sections 12.12 and 12.16 of the Utah County Land Use Ordinance with modifications as specified in the staff report, along with any applicable renumbering and reformatting in each section based on the findings specified in the staff report under subsection 5.
Motion, and is there a second? Lorraine seconds. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Say nay. The recommendation is passed. And we'll now move to the last item on our agenda. I think there's only one more, right? Other business, yeah? So we'll move to the discussion on the updating the Utah County Planning Commission Resolution Number 2013-01 for rules of conduct for public hearing and meetings. We don't need a public hearing for this,
No, this is just a discussion item.
just a discussion. One that we can't even act on.
No, we would probably need to notice it up as an action item. And
Okay.
So the thought was, we had a discussion last month,
Right.
got some ideas, we put something together, kind of
Okay.
see where you land and go from there.
Yeah, saw that you dated it on 19th of August.
That was a hope. We'll get to that in a minute.
Is someone worked on this? Is there anyone?
Yeah.
You want to speak
I'll
to
kinda-
the recommendation here?
I'll tee it up a little bit. So, myself and Mr. Ayer kind of took some time and took our red pens to the existing one. Dale's was a little bigger than mine, but I think we both kind of landed on a version we feel kind of simplifies it, kind of creates some basic framework that'll give you all some tools in the event that you need to utilize. You have a meeting with a lot of people and you have some framework that'll kind of help keep things organized. Let me just pull up maybe a clean version. We got that red line. It's kind of hard to see everything. So this is kind of a red-blue line, but if I turn off the edits, you'll see ignore the formatting, but you'll see kind of what we landed with. We kind of kept the basic framework of having time limits. We did specify the difference of a public hearing, which is, we had that discussion before, which is required to allow people to speak who desire. And so we've really focused on most of that being tailored to strictly a public hearing. But as part of our conversation last week, we've also included a provision, I think it's number 7, that would create at all public planning commission meetings, a period of general comment at the end of the meeting that would allow someone to come and just say whatever, similar to what the county commission does. That way, it's not part of the action item that really isn't designed to receive public hearing. Some of our more administrative issues that can be challenging, like we said before, to kind kind of allow people to speak, thinking that they're going to have influence, when really on an administrative item, that influence is very limited. But still giving them an opportunity to speak their mind and feel like they had a voice.
So if I had to summarize in my own words, we would limit the invitation for public comment to only when we open it to public hearings, and then only for additional comment at the end of the meeting during a public comments section of the agenda.
Yep.
And we would not collect a roll of speakers. I mean, that's kind of out at least not included in this language. And so if we open the public hearing, we would invite people to come, I guess, get in line or raise their hand or whatever, but they'd come to the mic and they'd have 3 minutes each, or 7 minutes if there was a group. They would be reminded of recommendation not to repeat things that have already been said. And we can stop someone from speaking, or the chair can stop someone from speaking if they get off track with one of those recommendations and don't speak to the topic, or if they were redundant. And we can still be coerced into hearing the rest of their comments if we have a motion and a second and a vote to continue hearing the person to the end of their 3 minutes.
I mean, we could have the opportunity
Okay,
to
opportunity.
enjoy the.
Coerced or opportunity, either way.
That's a good summary.
So-
it's a good summary. I'll maybe let Mr. Ayer speak to the sign-up sheet. I think that was your X. One, and then the other thing that we did kind of eliminate was before we had a rebuttal period, and that got tricky to manage sometimes.
Sure.
And so it doesn't keep you from asking someone to say, hey, we have another comment or question. But yeah.
It means we don't have to go with turn orders, and it's your turn, and you've
Yes.
already had 3 minutes at the microphone. Now it's your turn.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about simplifying this. It's not a debate. You know, they're not here to win a debate and, you know, take up sides and different things. You are the decision maker. You have everything before you. They can make comments, but that's really where it ends, okay? This is a public body having a public meeting in public, not inviting the public to do your work, do your job, or tell you how to do it. And so we're just trying to say, hey, let's have public comment that's appropriate. And this seemed to get a little bit, too involved, this old resolution from, 2013. And so what we tried to do is just simplify it for you folks. That's really all you need. Open it to a public hearing, take those comments. If they're valuable, if they're not, it's fine. It's required by state law. We have to do it. And then for public comment, I really haven't seen it done better than our county commission. It just works seamlessly with the meeting. No one's upset. We'll even close the commission meeting for closed meetings according to law, and then open it back up for public comment. And those who care stick around and talk, and those who don't leave. So this seems to be about as simplified a process of public comment and hearing as you could have, and hopefully that's what we've given you.
The other thing I would add is we did kind of tighten up the allowance to provide written material. We said you need to submit it before the meeting, as a little earlier deadline so we can get it out to you, or as a speaker, and that gives you the opportunity to accept that. In the past, we've had people kind of congregating up here before the meeting and wanting to pass something out to you, the planning commission, and just didn't feel that was appropriate. So that way we kind of tighten that up a little bit too.
And then as far as the roles, you don't need the roles. You will, as the chairman, will always have them, hey, what is your name? So that it's clear on the record who is speaking.
And that's consistent with state law. We took a look at that. We just have to record who speaks.
Identify them.
I like what I've seen. I just have a couple of comments on paragraph 3. You refer to paragraph 14 below, which is now paragraph 6. So you might want to change that. And then I'm really offended because you don't accept faxes anymore. You know, so I'm like, come on, you know?
The dawn of the dinosaurs has ended.
I think we unplugged our machines.
No, other than that, I don't have any objections. Everything looks good to me.
I don't think this prohibits it, and we've only seen it maybe a couple times where instead of written materials, we have someone who's able to bring up a map or a PowerPoint or other digital materials. Is there anything in here that prevents anyone from doing that?
We should probably address it. I don't know that we would prevent them, but we would require them to leave it with us. So if they bring it on a flash drive or something, they're going to have, if it's seen by you, it has to stay here.
What if it's a website? Like they're bringing up Google Maps to be able to show an aerial view of an area of
Ooh.
something that we're considering,
Boy,
which can be helpful to the discussion. We don't want to
Well, we'd
say
have-
no, but
yeah, but we'd have to find some way to capture it.
Take some screenshots.
Screens, I don't know. We'd have to ask
Or the
IT how to do that.
recording of the video if that's pointed.
I don't know, but
Okay.
you know, it's got to be something that can be put in the record. If it can't be put in the record, we'd have to say no. You can't consider that. At least that would be my advice. Please don't consider that. Please don't let them show it. If they want to talk about it, they can talk about it all they want. But to submit it to you, we have to have some form in the record.
They bring their TikTok reels, and as long as it's online, we can have it, right?
Until it gets taken down.
A screenshot?
Maybe I don't know. I'd want to talk to IT about that and then make sure we can capture it and it's in our system before we'd allow it.
Okay.
It's just not a good idea. Those things change when they're out in cyberspace online, and we can't control that.
Do we have the same rules in place when it comes to like staff presentations? I know sometimes we throw questions at you guys and you say, oh, hey, if we pull this up, then we can show you what we mean. Do we manage that any differently?
I don't know.
No, and we have in the past used our website. Our portal map is part of it's not our official presentation, but I think it's a record that we can document. These are also
These are recorded.
recorded on YouTube.
I don't know what's recorded, but the meeting's
Something's
recorded.
And so we could make sure the presentation is shown, but yeah, so I don't want to limit tools that are really useful for sure. But I see the point.
Yeah.
Maybe that's one thing that we can maybe work on a little bit, tighten up a little bit, and then bring this back.
Maybe we could find out if this behind us is part of the recording.
Generally, it
I
can.
mean, most computers have some kind of you can either take a screenshot, a still image, or you can just hit record and record whatever you're presenting there. So I think there's going to be a way that we can do it.
Whichever device they're using.
Okay, is there
Yeah.
any?
We'll definitely look at that aspect of it and maybe see if we can create some wording under the written material section that might capture that a little bit. We'll come up with something,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah. I like the idea that you say we're modeling it with the county commissioners. I mean, and that works really well. I mean, we already have a model of how it works,
We do.
and you said it works really well.
It does.
Do they sometimes see digital content
They do.
in those public comments?
Yeah, so they're using their screens like in front of you, and then the big screen. Yeah, they're using them. I just don't know what's recorded and what's not.
So maybe we could take an action item to find out if they capture that somehow and
Yeah.
whether we can allow it as well.
A lot of times it's a work session item, but there are action items that like an applicant will bring written material, but someone who just shows up unannounced. I don't know if I've seen that, but it's not unheard of. Someone that says, "Hey, I got public comment. I got to show you this."
Here's a picture of what happened outside the building.
Right. So, okay, we'll take a look at that and see if we can build in some flexibility.
Yeah, thanks for taking our thoughts into consideration and
Good
brainstorming.
thoughts.
Then any further discussion on this tonight? So it sounds like if not, then you're gonna maybe work on adding some digital, the ability to accept digital material that they might deliver.
Right.
Yep, to capture that as part of the record.
And
So you're okay with everything you've seen so far?
I appreciate that it's very succinct, very, like, cut out the fat, make it as simple as can be.
Yep.
So,
Do you need to add text messages to number 6 for written material? Written information submitted before the meeting, including emails. Do we need to add text or just that counts as an umbrella?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to. 'Cause we set up an email, so when people, like our last big public issue,
Yes.
we had set up, we created a specific planning commission email with a domain that was specific to the planning commission, and we directed all comments to there. And so it doesn't keep someone from saying, hey, I got your number, I'm gonna text you, but we prefer it to be directed to an email officially.
Right. I mean, as an exhibit, they may bring something like, here's a conversation I had with one of you, or here's a conversation that was between 2 other people that I grandmaed, and now I've brought it in here as an exhibit.
Yeah, I guess if they print it off, that could be deemed written, but we'll consider that too. Make sure that we're capturing all medium of communication.
If we have to.
so do we, as a commission, do we want to direct staff to do anything and so that we can add this back onto the agenda for our next meeting?
Yeah, how do we make
Or-
it happen?
Huh?
How do we make it happen?
Yeah,
Instead of-
that's-
We've been talking about it for like 2-3 months. How do we like actually
Place
do?
on an action item
Okay.
on the agenda.
With the issues that we've discussed here, the changes.
I think we should have a motion here to make this an action item on the agenda for the next meeting.
I'll make a
Along
motion.
with
Give them
staff
direction,
making.
but we can't move on it because it's not an actionable item, right?
And you don't need to.
Yeah.
All
Right.
you need to do is tell
They'll
us to
just
put it on
bring
the
it.
agenda
Okay,
next time.
Just give them
We will.
direction.
All right, so let's have you work on the digital content acceptance, and then let's add this should we add it as an action item then for our next meeting? That we will vote to adopt this, or whatever. We'll vote on this change to this resolution in our next meeting.
Our next regular meeting
Next
that
regular
doesn't
meeting.
happen to be a picnic.
Got it.
where there's space,
Okay.
make it so.
On that note, I don't think today was the deadline for July. We were really hoping to give you guys a break and us a break. And so it sounds like we'll be able to, we don't have any applicant-driven applications for July. We still have a few housekeeping things we'll bring to you, but those will wait till August.
So we won't meet again until August? Oh,
That's
good.
what I'm trying to spit out.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, and with that, I think we've reached the end of our agenda for tonight. So the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Very nice.